Hi guys, and if you don't know me, my name's Jake, and on this channel we talk about freelancing, small business and personal finance. Right guys, and in today's video, this is the next video in the series around saying no to that next freelance offer. In this video we're going to be talking about jobs or businesses that offer the wrong kind of culture. So this is another reason to say no, and I'm going to jump straight into the video right now. If you're an online freelancer, it probably won't impact you as much as if you're an on-location worker or a contractor that has to go into the office every day or a couple of times a week. That said, I've done some online freelancing before, and the culture does permeate in terms of emails and communications and Skype messages that one receives anyway. So even if you're not working out of that location of the business, you're still going to feel the culture in the email communication, on the Skype calls, etc, etc. So it's really important. So how would it affect you as a freelancer, the company culture? Well, it sort of trickles down from the owners or the top level. I didn't used to believe this when I used to hear things about, Steve Jobs or some of these large business owners, Mark Zuckerberg, how the culture can permeate throughout the organization. But since I've been working freelancing for circa 10 years, and I've worked in different organizations of different sizes, I've really noticed how at board level, how that trickles down to senior managers and then on to the employees. No matter how big the organization, culture does run through it. So first things first, one thing you can do to understand what the company culture might be is to look at the ownership structure. If it's a public business, you can understand, or you can try to find out how it's funded. I try to ask this at the interview level, something you can't find out on their website. Then you can ask the recruiter or you can ask the owners. If it's a very small business, it's likely to be owned by that business owner, but if it's a corporation, you can see how that's funded. Particularly if it's a startup, you want to understand how it's funded, what level of funding they're at, what's their cash burn rate, so like how quickly they're losing money. You might not be able to find that from the bosses. So you can try and dig a little bit deeper to find out whether they're losing money, how fast. You can certainly ask, are they profitable? They should be able to give you a straight yes or no answer. And from that, you might be able to find out what the company culture is. You can ask like how stressful it is when they're looking for the next round of funding, blah, blah, blah. How well prepared they are. If they're not a startup and they're a business, you can ask if they're profitable anyway. They might not be. How the business is looking generally, what's the business landscape, how do they compare against the competition, etc. And you can judge based on the person that's interviewing you. You can sort of get a feeling for how stressed they are. And obviously, like, one person isn't a reflection of the whole business, but based on their answers and how they're behaving, you can get some insight into the company culture. You can also ask about what kind of management style managers have, how they like to manage things, their communication styles. You can ask about reporting schedules, how fast, how frequently, what style of reporting. A more formal culture will probably have quarterly and monthly reporting, maybe even weekly reporting. It may be done over PowerPoints in a stand-up type of environment where you have to give a presentation. Less formal environments might be, if you're in a tech sort of startup, you might have weekly stand-ups, you might have sprints, you have to do things like that. If you're working for a family or a small business, you might want to understand how stable the cash flows are, how stable the business is, how many customers they have, things like that, so you can gauge how stressed they're going to be. You might also want to ask, is this any business? Do they do it full time? Because you can gauge a bit of information that way. If you're asking these questions over like an email or messaging system from one of the freelance online websites, that might put people off a little bit. So I'd probably, because it definitely put me off if someone starts asking me about, is this my only business or whatever. So you might not want to be that direct, like in the written form, but if you're in a conversation over Skype and it's like a 45-minute call, you can maybe delve in when they ask, do you have any questions? Then you can start asking, well, can you tell me a bit about the business, a bit about yourself, like what, how many people work there, and you can sort of figure out what that might be. You can also ask about, as I mentioned, reporting styles. You can ask about how many managers there are, how many levels of management, and what KPIs are like. KPI stands for Key Performance Indicators. I'm sure some of the viewers will know about that, but some new freelancers might not know. It's really what you might be judged upon, and those would likely get reported into the next layer of management or if it's a startup, you know, you'd be reporting those KPIs to potentially the owner or a senior stakeholder within that small business. What about the boss? So I've mentioned about the ownership, I've mentioned about the funding, I've mentioned about the cash flows, I've mentioned about reporting. Those all will impact the boss and what they're like. I'm going to go into the boss or your manager or the person you're reporting into, however you want to describe it. I'm going to go into that in a bit more detail in another video in this series on reasons not to accept that next freelance job that you've been offered, specifically about difficult bosses. But I'm going to touch on it lightly here in terms of culture. Like if they've got those stresses, like cash flow stresses, or they're looking to raise money and they've got a bit of stress around that, or maybe they're a public business and they've got stress around reporting dates, or indeed there's a lot of levels of management or bureaucracy. So all of those factors will impact on your boss's behaviour. And I think it's quite important to consider their management style. And you can ask them in the interview process, what's your management style? How do you like to manage people? What goes wrong? Blah blah blah. We'll go into more of those questions in the video specifically about bosses. And also in the book I'm writing about freelancing, there'll be definitely some focus on how you can find out and how you can sort of gauge whether that boss is going to be a nightmare to work with. So I won't go too much into detail right now, but essentially all those input factors will have an impact on their behaviour. But you can also gauge it in terms of how they're asking questions, or are they relaxed. If you ask them, if they're being very cold and quiet and just a bit like that, then you can sort of like ask them if that's a technique or if they're normally like that. It's completely fine to ask that, and it's actually quite forward thinking, because not many people would have the confidence in an interview to ask something like, can you describe your working personality? And you can cross-reference that with how they're acting in the interview, and then you'd be able to gauge if it's just a technique that they're sort of the cold-hearted interviewer technique, or if they're actually like that as an individual. Their communication style is quite important as well. So you can ask them about their communication style, how they like to receive communications. Do they prefer it via email? Do they prefer it face-to-face? Do they prefer structured meetings? There's a bit of detail here, but we'll talk about it in another video. So the next point in this video about saying no to a freelance role based on the wrong culture is thinking about how they start the day. So this is really interesting. I don't know if many people you've spoken to or other videos mention this, but think about the culture of the business permeates throughout the structure of the week as well. So the start of the day really is like how everything kicks off. I've worked at some businesses, for example, that have a hard 9 o'clock start. Everyone's in at 9 o'clock. If you get there at 9:05 or even 9:04, then heads turn, it's noted. I've worked at one company recently which it was so strict that if you arrived at 9:05 more than once a week, you get an email saying from the person I was reporting into, by the way, our working hours are XYZ. So that culture is really, can impact the start of the day. What else can happen at the start of the day? Well, some businesses and some organizations that are hiring freelancers, they sort of get freelancers a bit more and they want that flexibility, so they might allow you to come in at different times and leave at different times as long as you give notice. So the start of the day, what else can be impacted by different types of culture in terms of the start of the day? Well, as a freelancer, you might be looking for that flexibility in what time you actually start in the day, and forward-thinking startups and companies nowadays are allowing flexibility in when you start. So like a more relaxed environment, they might let you start at 10, 10:30, whatever, and they may even be open to when you want to work. That's definitely something you can ask at interview about working times. Another thing that might appear in a sort of open, forward-thinking company is free breakfast. Some companies out there will provide fruit, porridge, teas and coffees. They may also provide sort of like entertainment, like games and things like that. Maybe table tennis, snooker, whatever it might be. This tends to happen in like well-funded startups or tech companies or companies that are growing, etc. It doesn't necessarily mean they're a chilled out place, and I've heard and read articles that installing a foosball machine doesn't mean that it's an open, forward, flexible type culture or a place where people are going to want to work. But it's not a bad thing to have that. The other thing about the start of the day, you can't really judge it from the interview process, but you can definitely judge it in your first week. How do people come into the office? Do they greet each other? What are the conversations they're having? Are they going straight into business? Are people arriving early and like leaving late? Things like that, and that gives you an insight into the kind of culture. Also, what are they doing? Are they spending time like on a corporate intranet? Are they, are you seeing people going on like news websites? You can then see that it might be a little bit more relaxed. Are people having coffees and chilling out in the start of the day, or is it hard grinding stuff where people come in at 9 or even earlier, and they open the laptop? Might even be like that hard grind culture, which is the complete opposite, where people are getting in at 9 AM, they're opening the laptops and they're going straight into it. There's not a lot of discussion or talk with one another, and that can, that's an interesting thing. Like, you maybe don't want to be involved in a culture like that. Don't get me wrong, I love to work hard, but sometimes like having that social aspect, having a more relaxed environment is sort of conducive to like better work outcomes. I produce better work when it's more relaxed, especially on working times and the start of the day. So that's like one thing to consider. Yeah, that start of day thing. What about lunch times? The working culture does actually impact what happens at lunch. Do people go out together at lunch? Do they eat lunch at their desk? Is it sociable at work? Are people going to the canteen together? Is it flexible work times? What else can happen? Well, the current place I'm working, I'm not going to mention the name that I'm working at, but the current place I'm working, we have lunch, but a lot of people don't leave the office. They have lunch at the desk. What I've noticed in my first couple of weeks there is that people have short lunch, so even though they get the hour lunch, they tend not to take the hour. Now, I think over time that's probably quite a bad thing. I've noticed that when you take that solid hour, you get that time to refresh, you get that time to think, and in a lot of times, like thinking about it, when I take that time, just to relax, I use that time to also phone family and friends, to have food out, to get fresh air, to walk. My work quality improves. I come back and I feel fresh, and the quality of the work is just way better. So my performance is actually better with a lunch break. And that's the thing you want to be aware of. Like, maybe you're the same as me, maybe not, maybe you're fine with like a 10-minute lunch break and you can power through and you're fine with that. But if you're like me and you need like 45 minutes to an hour and you want to have that work-life balance, you can definitely ask about lunch times at your interview. You can just ask like, where do people go for lunch? Do people have lunch together? If they stutter or don't know, that might be a warning sign. If they're relaxed, it might be to do with the personality, of course. So lunch times is a good gauge of like company culture. It's kind of interesting. It's not necessarily the formal company culture, but it's actually give an illustration of what it's like to work there when you see what's happening during lunch times. What about socials? So socials for me covers like not only after work drinks or socializing after work, but also maybe the end of the week. Some companies do end of the week drinks. They may even do like talks and presentations at the end of the week. They may do end of month presentations and celebrations, etc. They may do company or team socials and nights out, etc. I think it's really important to find out about that. And also you might want to ask, like, as a freelancer or contractor, are you allowed to go on those? I've seen it both ways. I've been at companies where you've been completely excluded and you have to stay in the company office while hundreds of employees are going out to a staff like day or whatever, training or entertainment day. And I've worked at other organizations where you're invited exactly like the other employees and you're treated almost as an equal. So it's important to sort of understand what that's like. You might want to be a little bit delicate about asking about the difference between contractors and employees, because you don't want to sort of emphasize the difference at interview stage. But you might want to ask about company socials. What is it actually like to work there? What do they do? How do they celebrate success might be a question you ask. Because that'll give you an idea about, if these celebrations and socials exist. And if you're not welcome, they'll probably mention in the interview process that like it's not available for freelancers and contractors, but it gives you that information up front. Alright guys, that's all the reasons. Run through them very quickly. Wrong culture could be to do with the owners and how that permeates down. It could be to do with funding and cash flow, so specifically at startups or failing businesses. It might be to do with your manager or your boss and their personality and how that affects the culture, specifically your time at the business. How the start of the day and how that culture impacts the start of the day, what people are doing, etc. So lunch times, as well as the corporate formal culture, also the informal culture, which is sort of what happens at the business. So lunch times and what people do there, and also socials and celebrations, what kind of socials and celebrations happen, and are freelancers and contractors welcome? If you've got any tips or suggestions from your own experience, guys, please put it down in the comments below. share it with our community. The more we share, the more we grow. If you've got a specific query or you've got a question that you want to talk through, you can definitely email me directly at progressiseverything@gmail.com. Also, I'm going to be doing a book. If you like and subscribe this video, I'm going to be giving out free ebooks to lucky winners every month. The other thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be helping people via courses and consulting on helping people to transition from being a 9-to-5 employee to being a freelancer or a consultant. If you're interested in this, definitely contact me at progressiseverything@gmail.com. I can do one-to-one sessions over Skype. I'm also going to be producing a course. It's going to be a low-cost course. So on this course, it's going to be designed for people either looking to transition away from their 9-to-5 job into being a freelancer or contractor, or for those that are freelancing already that want to increase the amount of offers they get for work, increase their rate, and increase their freedom. It's going to be an in-depth course which is going to have even more insider tips, pro tips, hints, advice, stories, maybe even some interviews as well. In addition to this, guys, I have a website, progressiseverything.com. Make sure to check that out. On that website, there'll be more exclusive content. You can also sign up to the website where you get access to the email list where I put in exclusive tips and tricks and offers within those emails, which are likely to be around 2 to 3 per month. I'm not going to overload you or anything like that, but make sure to sign up where you get more exclusive content and you get access to more awesome things. Really hope you liked the video. If you did, make sure to smash the like button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Make sure you check out my other videos for tips, tricks and hacks, as well as other pros and cons.